Welcome back to IGB100. This is week 10 and this week we are still continuing on with the Sidescroller game. Specifically this week we will be looking into setting up a more complex and interesting enemy type that does something a little bit different from the enemies that we have had in the previous two games, which admittedly just ran straight towards you. This enemy is going to be a patrolling enemy that has an aggro zone or radius. So we will basically be walking through how to set that up. So to get started with this, we have already set up a enemy zone prefab for you, which you should just be able to drop in and have something similar to this represented in your scene view. To explain what this system is that it's basically an enemy contained within a collider. Now, this enemy is a very similar enemy to, say, the ones that we've used before. It has its own script, it has its own animations that are already set up for you. We're not going to go ahead and do all of that again just for this enemy type, it's already done. Interestingly though, this enemy is located within a collider where there are two patrol points, or at least two patrol points, that this enemy should be able to navigate to within this aggro zone, within this aggro location. Now basically the idea is that if the player enters this area, then the enemy will aggro onto it and it will attack them. So to implement this functionality, we will need to script it, which means we need to open up the enemy script attached to the enemy contained within the enemy zone prefab. So open up the enemy script, and you'll notice immediately that this is a pretty hefty script already. We've done a lot of the work for you. This is all work we've done before, so we're not going to waste time by doing it again. You have done this before. But you'll notice in update there is a bit of a blocked out piece of code for you that essentially talks about this idea of doing something if you're not dead and if you don't have a target. For instance, in this case we want to be able to patrol. So that's a function that we're going to need to write. Otherwise, if we do have a target, attack that target. So to set this up, we're going to need to write these two methods in particular, as well as comment block out this code when it's valid. So to start that, let's make a new method under update. We'll call it private void patrol. Now what patrol is going to do is essentially patrol between the 2 points that we talked about just before. These points are patrol point 1 and patrol point 2, which exist in this enemy zone collider. So it's going to move between these 2 points, which means we need some kind of container to store them in. So at the top, let's just make a new section dedicated to patrolling variables. Patrolling variables. And the first thing we're going to add is a public game object array, and we'll call that patrol points. And this is going to be something that we set up in Unity. The next thing we're going to set up is a private int that is just holding on to our current patrol point. So in this case, because we only have 2 patrol points, it's either going to be either 1 or 2, but because an array indexes from 0 and 1, we're going to make this equal to 0. So it's either going to be 0 or 1 in this case. The final thing that we're going to add is going to be a public float that is just going to be our patrol point distance. And this is going to be the distance that we are away from the current patrol point before we swap to the next one. So it's basically a proximity check. If we're near the current patrol point or close enough, go to the other one instead. And I'm going to set that to something quite small, like 0.1. Cool. So having set up these variables, let's now put them into use. So go back down to your patrol method. Now we have 2 patrol points that already determine if we want to be facing left or right. So what we can first do is just say face in the direction that we need to be heading in. regardless of even if we're attacking the player or not at this point. So let's snap rotate towards the current patrol point, and we're just going to use a transform.lookAt method here, and this is going to look at, first of all, our patrol points array, the index of which is going to be our current patrol point, but specifically here we just want to look at the transform.position of that specific patrol point. So hopefully that makes sense. We also want the animator to play our walk animation, which, as I mentioned before, we have set up for you already. And now we want to move in the direction of our patrol point. So let's type here, move in direction of patrol point, and type a bit of code that's just going to be a transform.translate, I think will work here, along our vector3.forward vector, so in the direction that I'm currently facing. And again, don't forget to times this by delta time. And we also want to multiply this by our move speed. Cool. Finally, if we get to the next patrol point, we don't want to keep moving in that direction. So what we want to do is instead make the current patrol point the other patrol point. So what we want to say essentially is that if we are close to or have arrived at the patrol point, then switch to next, or perhaps the first patrol point in this case. And this is going to be a conditional that checks the distance, so vector3 distance, between my current position, transform position, and the current patrol point that we're currently moving towards. So that is going to be patrol points with our index, which is current patrol point, followed by .transform.position. And we want to check if this is less than our patrol point distance. So, just to go over this conditional again, basically we're checking if the distance between my current position and the patrol point that I'm moving towards within the patrol points that I'm aware of, if it's smaller than the patrol point distance, then let's do something about that. And I still think I have an extra brace here somewhere, which is a little odd. Okay, just make sure you don't have an extra one there. I'm not sure why that happened. Within this condition, I am going to add just another conditional that's checking if the current patrol point is equal to the maximum number of patrol points, because if we're at the last patrol point, then we don't want to go to the third patrol point because there isn't one. So we want to see if our current patrol point is equal to our patrol points dot length. But remember, arrays, when we talk about length, they don't index from 0, so we actually need to say -1 here. So it indexes essentially from 0, so that if we're at our second patrol point, we're at patrol point index 1. And if we are, just make current patrol point equal 0. Otherwise, as you would imagine, current patrol point will instead be plus equal 1. So if we're at patrol point 0, go to the next patrol point, which is, in this case, 1. So the reason why you set something up like this is if you have more than one patrol point, just say you have this slime going between maybe 5 or 6 patrol points on various terrain, this system will work for that. So we're not just simply switching between 1 and 2, we are checking to see if we're at the last patrol point. So let's see if this patrol code works as intended. If we just go up and take out the comment block here, leave this in still because we still haven't written the attack code yet, but just make sure that patrol is available within this enemy logic block. So go back into Unity, so make sure you're not getting any red errors, and don't forget to click on the enemy and drag in the couple of patrol points. So you'll need to extend that array, make its size equal to the number of patrol points in question, in this case 2, and just drag in patrol point 1 and patrol point 2. And I'm actually going to update this prefab by pressing apply now, so that should save permanently. So once you've got all that set up, if you press play now, the enemy should start patrolling. So what you'll notice is that he's only patrolling between those 2 points, even if this aggro collider zone was larger. So if you do make that zone larger by extending the size of the box collider, say if we did that, you would need to move these points as well. It's not actually going to update everything for you, so keep that in mind. But we have a patrolling enemy, which is great. So, patrolling enemy, but we still don't have an enemy that is of any threat to us at all. It doesn't attack us, which is a problem. So let's go back into our enemy script, and we'll do it just before patrol. We'll set up a new method call to private void attack. And attack is going to be a little bit more complex than patrolling, because first of all what we need to do is check to see if we are in range of the player. So we're going to get in range of player, and this is going to be a conditional that's checking, similar to what we just did before, the distance between our transform dot position. But instead of the patrol point, what we're actually looking for is the target. So our target dot transform dot position. And this code doesn't activate unless we have a target. So we have a target, we're going to attack. So if that, deleted too much, is greater than, and we have set up a variable for you just so that this makes sense, very similar to the patrol distance, which is the attack range. The attack range is also quite small. It's currently 0.75. You can change that if you want. But if it is greater than that attack range, then we need to do something about that. So first of all, let's just make our animator play the walk animation. So we're going to try and get within range of the player. Let's first of all walk towards them. However, we also need to look in the direction of the player. And we need to check which side of the player, which side the player is with regards to us. So if we are left of the enemy, so we need to say if the targets dot transform dot position dot x axis, so it's x position, is less than our transform dot position dot x, then do something about that, which will be simply to transform dot look at the patrol points 0 dot transform dot position. So if it's to the left of us, look at a patrol point that will be to the left of us. However, if the enemy is right of us, then we can use an else if. That's basically going to be the same thing. We'll copy this again. And instead of less than, we're looking for greater than, and instead of patrol point 0, we're thinking of patrol point 1. And there'll need to be an if there. Finally, what you want to do here is, once you're looking in the correct direction, move in the direction of the player. And this is simply going to be transform.translate. Actually, this line of code is exactly what we wrote down here. So let's just copy that and put that there. Now what you can do, if you want it to be interesting, is maybe multiply the move speed by 2, so that when you actually have player targeted, you move slightly faster. So you're not necessarily just walking at that same slow patrol speed, if you want to. So, if we're not in range of the player, get in range of the player. However, if we are in range of the player, once if, we can say something like, if the vector3.distance between our transform dot position and our target dot transform dot position, if it is instead less than or equal to our attack range, and it is time dot time greater than our attack timer, then we could do something about that as well. So if it is basically we're in range and it's time to attack, let's do something about that. And first of all, we're just going to play the attack animation. We'll instantiate the attack sound at our current transform and rotation. And finally, just make the attack timer equal time.time plus the attack rate. So you may be wondering, how does the enemy actually do damage to the player? It's just playing an animation and making the next attack animation sometime in the future. It's essentially using the same setup as the player does. There is a damage event which that attack animation calls, which spawns a hitbox which does damage to the player. So to test this, what we can do is go all the way back up to our update and just uncomment these two lines, so that if we have a target, we should try to attack it. So uncommenting those two lines, go back into Unity, make sure you again have no red errors, press play, and this time if we move into the aggro zone, the enemy should attack us. That is really loud, so I'll just mute that. But if you've done everything right, that should be the result that you get. Cool. So what we have now is a enemy zone prefab with an enemy, I'll just update that we can kind of start dropping around our environment. We can start experimenting a little bit more with the enemy placement as well as the setup of a more interesting level. So what you may want to start doing is moving various parts of the level around, such as raised platforms or even lifts that go up and down using simple animations that have interesting enemy placements on them. So start thinking about the design of your level, or the world that your player is going to move around in. And basically next week we'll come back to this regarding the objectives, perhaps maybe killing all of the enemies in the level, as well as picking up a key to enable progression to the next level. But that'll be next week's work.